My name is Ted Bergdahl, and I will be the moderator of this event. And I'm really pleased to see that so many of you are dedicated to this very important matter. I know that we have participants from many countries. I will soon let you answer a poll on your location, but before we do so, I will go through some of the practical information. Since your audio and video is turned off, the chat is the way to ask questions or post comments, and you can start using it right now if you wish, maybe by reflecting on how the situation is in your country and your nearby democratic institutions. Do they meet the requirements of Agenda 2030 regarding political participation? Please let us know, and Arvid Lindén from the Swedish Agency for Participation will moderate the chat and forward your questions and thoughts to me and the speakers. This webinar is, as you probably have noticed already, being recorded and will be published on the Nordic Welfare Centre's YouTube channel. Written interpretation is available and can be activated with the closed caption button in the toolbar. If you have technical challenges, please write your questions in the chat and we will take care of it. And all the presentation material slides will be sent out after the webinar. This webinar is a co-arrangement between Nordic Welfare Centre and the Swedish Agency for Participation, where Malin Ekman Aldén is the Director General, and you will open the webinar more officially, so please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Ted, and warmly welcome to everybody attending today. It's an honor to be here today, and I think the theme of the subject for today is a very, very important one. I was thinking in preparing this very brief introduction that this seminar is more appropriate at this time than we maybe thought when we started the planning. I think when we look around the world at the moment, and specifically I'm thinking of the big election in the United States, but also on the EU discussions going on at the moment, I think we all can see things happening with our democratic principles that are going in a direction that I maybe as myself wouldn't have dreamt of a number of years ago. And I think the need for democratic participation and broad democratic participation is very high today, even higher than any time before. Today we will speak on the subject of democratic processes and disability and how to increase the influence of disability in these different processes. I think this is also a very important issue. I don't think, doesn't matter which Nordic or maybe global country you would look at, you would see that people with disability would have less opportunities in general in the society than other groups. And maybe one of the key answers to why this is happening is that the situation, the priorities, and the obstacles of persons with disabilities are very little in view for the political development in these countries. And why not? Well, a key explanation is obviously that people that are experiencing this situation themselves are not in these decision-making bodies. They are not allowed voice in the democratic talk in their country, and the result would also be that they are left behind in many ways. And when we talk about the agenda 30, the development agenda, and how to ensure that it will actually go in the direction that has been decided, there is a theme, you know that one, leave no one behind. And that is not only like something you say, it's really something that you actually need to use, because if you leave a big part of the community or the society behind, the sustainability goals will never be achieved. And so to ensure that people with disabilities and disability as an item is introduced and strongly protected and talked about in the political democratic discussion, I think is a key thing to ensure that that the development agenda and the sustainability goals are actually reached as we hope they will be. So that was, and today we will have this perspective looked at from the Nordic perspective. And I think in the Nordic countries, if you compare to many other countries of the world, we have a rather extended welfare system. There is rather a lot of support in the society. That would not that does not mean that we are the best in actually involving people with disabilities in democratic processes. And I think for people with disabilities in our Nordic countries, there are still so many obstacles to be involved, even though you want to, and you are maybe even elected to some kind of post. But looking outside the Nordic countries, the obstacles might be, of course, even bigger, because there are not practical solutions in place and support that is essential to actually take this role as an individual or a politician. And uh, and so this is really an item. But also sometimes I think that we, with this big welfare system in the Nordic countries, there can also be create that can also create some kind of lameness, because the whole community is maybe looking at people with disability as a group, as something that somebody or a group that should be protected and cared for, but they don't necessarily look at the group as a very um, active human resource, and a part of the actually development of our countries. So a lot of money does not necessarily mean a lot of influence. So I think that can also be a question to discuss today, I hope. But so I'm really glad, and I think it was just in time to have this seminar, because there is a big democratic deficit when it comes to disability and people with disabilities. And I hope that this seminar will be like a stepping stone to increase this discussion, and hopefully also be a stepping stone for many people that are on want to and are on the edge to actually involve themselves in the democratic process, which can be on, of course, on all levels. And there are so many things in our surrounding that actually needs to be developed and changed to ensure that we have a sustainable world in the future. And sustainable world means social sustainability as much as, of course, ecological sustainability. So very much welcome today, and I hope you will have a interesting, enjoyable, and a fruitful seminar. And yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Malin. Stay with us for a while, because I'm going to ask you a question, the same questions that I would like to ask to the participants. And the question is, and I think we'll get a poll now as well. Hope you can see it soon at least. There we go. What do you hope to gain from this webinar? And while the participants are answering, Malin, what do you hope to gain from this webinar?
Well, I hope to have to gain a lot of good examples that can be used wherever you are active and working. I think there are so many interesting and important things going on in different countries and different parts of our countries that we can share. I also think that this seminar will contribute to see the involvement of persons with disabilities and disability as an issue, as a very important and crucial input within the general democratic development that is actually taking part, and that I think in our Nordic countries also needs to be um, taken forward. I think I'm working within the government structure, and I think it's a struggle for everybody working in the public sector. It doesn't matter if it's in the municipality or on regional or the government level, also to find new forms actually to collaborate, to in real life co-create with the citizens of our countries. If we don't manage to find these new ways of working and also preparing for decisions, I think the democratic deficit will increase, which is a very is a very dangerous situation for the whole democracy. And I think that is especially concerning groups that by different reasons are a bit segregated, are feeling a bit outside the democratic discussions today. And I think many people with disabilities are in these groups. So that is also something I hope for.
Thank you very much, and also thank you so much for emphasizing the importance of this topic, this issue. As you can see now, some of you at least, the poll results have come, and the top choice is new knowledge, followed by awareness. Any comments to that, Malin?
I think that is good, because I'm sure we will have a lot of knowledge, and knowledge usually also drives awareness. So yeah, it seems like a reasonable expectation of these seminar with all these really interesting guests that will follow now.
Yeah, I do think so too. Thank you very much, Malin, for this. And we have also two introductory speakers who will give us the full background. And I hope we can start with Nordic Welfare Centre and Lars Lindberg. I know you had some troubles connecting to this webinar, but I hope that you are with us now. You are a senior advisor and also leading a project that you will tell us more about. Please go ahead, Lars.
Yes, so we work with different kind of accommodation and networks, and so to disseminate the different knowledge and resources. So we arrange a lot of different public networks, meetings and seminars and conferences, and disseminate different kind of publications. And we have different focus areas: welfare policy, integration, and public health. And the fourth is disability issues. And all the work we do under the disability issues are based on the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD. And this project that I'm program manager for is named Universal Design, Participation and Democracy. And this project is a part of the action plan for the Nordic Cooperation on Disability. That is valid from 2018 to 2022. And this action plan is divided in three areas: human rights, sustainable development, and freedom of movement. And what I can say is this project is a part of this under the sustainable development. And this focus areas also we call it, as Malin also talked about, it's very important that it's a focus on the Agenda 2030. And there is also a Nordic vision that is based on the Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030 is the universal agenda to promote social, economic, and ecological sustainable development. There are five goals that include disabilities, and those the persons with disabilities or disabilities are mentioned 11 times, and the overall goal is leave no behind. This Nordic project, the purpose is to promote the exchange of experience and knowledge based on the five of the Agenda 2030 targets. And we have had now 4 webinars and physical meetings, and this is the 5th and last one. And all these webinars have in common that there will be set up a dialogue meeting, knowledge, and we will try together on mapping knowledge and good examples of how Agenda 2030 can be implemented, and how we can support the implementation. And each meeting are linked to the specific goals and target in the agenda. And this meeting is linked to the target 16.7. We also try to map indicators in the project. Altogether, will be a report that will be published in the beginning of next year with all the examples and the meetings collected, and with the analysis and recommendation from us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars, and we are very much looking forward to this report. And now I'd like to welcome Siv Holst from the Nordic Disability Council, or I think the right name is the Council of Nordic Cooperation on Disability. Maybe you can sort it out for us, but we are very much looking forward to get a short presentation of your work. I know that you are midway through the Nordic Council of Ministers Action Plan on Disability right now. So please go ahead, Siv.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. Besides being a part of the Nordic Disability Council, I'm also the vice chair of the Danish Disability Movement, and at the moment, I'm also a candidate for the UN CRPD committee. So I'm doing a lot of participation in debates. Let me just try to share my slides. And while I do that, try to imagine this. Try to imagine walking into a room where there's a really interesting subject. It could be what to do with the park next door, what to do with climate, what to do with disability policy. You walk into the room, you really have something to say, but no one wants to listen to you. Maybe you're just barred from even being able to talk and to be present in the room. So what are you going to do? It could be that you're denied sitting at the table. It could be it's because of the color of your skin. It could be because of your having a disability, because you are a woman. And if you have this feeling of not being able to share your opinions, being an active part of the discussion, how are you going to be an active participant in society? You would just feel that, well, they don't want my opinion in this room, I'm going to leave again. They don't want to hear me, so I don't participate. This is why it is so important to talk about democracy. We have to be able to be part of society. Sometimes we don't have an opinion on one thing or another, but if we have excluded, we have a really big issue. So it could also be said in this way: political participation is a precondition to be included in society and the core of our democracy. Participation in a broad range of activities where people are able to develop and express their opinions. It could be on how the world and how it's governed, or it could be everyday decisions that affect our lives. This is really important. So activities could be on almost anything. It could be participating in a debate. It could be in a local city hall or at the school where you're going to discuss what you're going to do in the school next year. You're able to join groups and organizations campaigning at the local, regional, and national level. It could be about the process of formal politics, such as voting, joining a political party, and standing for election. Everyone have to be able to participate in political life, to be able to influence society, and to be able to have a voice on all matters that are important to them. And the voice of persons with disability needs to be present in our political lives. So, unfortunately, we see that people with disability are not as involved in political life as those without disability. It could be for several reasons. It could be the activities themselves. Last time there was election in Denmark, there was some really interesting debate locally with one of the local politicians talking about our local area and what he wanted to do when he ran. But it was not accessible for me in a wheelchair. I could not enter the room, so I could not listen and I could not voice my opinion. It was not intentionally, of course, but it's part of the process of exclusion. The surroundings itself, but it could also be if you're blind, that you are not able to see when the debate meeting is taking place, or to see how you are going to vote. If you have a hearing problem, it might be that you cannot participate in debate because you cannot hear what anyone is saying and there's no sign language interpretation. Or it could be that the polling stations themselves not accessible. The picture I've included is from our national parliament in Denmark, where it wasn't very accessible, but they have gone a process of making it more accessible after a person in a wheelchair has been elected. And I was part of the inauguration of some of the first features. So the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, they guarantee us as persons with disability political rights and opportunity to enjoy them on an equal basis with others. And the state parties, the governments, have to undertake to ensure that persons with disability can effectively and fully participate in political and public life on an equal basis with others, directly or through freely chosen representatives, including the rights and opportunities for persons with disabilities to vote and be elected. And we have some promises in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So we have the member states has pledged that no one will be left behind and to endeavor to reach the furthest behind first. Unfortunately, they tend to forget this part of their promise sometimes. And in practice, it means they have to take explicit action to extreme poverty, curb inequality, and confront discrimination and fast-track progress for those furthest behind. And we have on agenda object 16.7 in the SDGs states that all countries of the world must ensure a responsive, inclusive, participation-based and representative decision-making at all levels. Unfortunately, we still have far to go. There was made an information report by the European Economical and Social Committee, where I'm a member, last year about the real access for people with disabilities to vote in European Parliament elections. The report concluded that in each of the 27 EU countries, there are laws or organizational arrangements which include some voters with disability from participating in EP elections. About 800,000 EU citizens from 16 member states are, on account of national rules, deprived of the right to participate in EP elections because of their disabilities or mental health problems. Millions of EU citizens have no possibility to vote because of organizational arrangements. It could be technical barriers, which do not take into account the needs for resulting from their disability. So the EEC called for legislation to be amended. The principles of universality, directness, and secrecy of elections in the 1976 Electoral Acts need to be clarified. This would make it possible to implement standards through the EU that would guarantee real voting rights for persons with disabilities. And steps need to be taken to secure the accordance of Article 29 in the Convention of Rights of Persons with Disability. We need to make decision makers worldwide notice the obstacles that are still hindering people with disabilities. Because if you cannot participate in our democracy, how can we be equal partners in our society? How can we be a part, an active part, become a part of the labor market, become good parents, become loving neighbors if we feel excluded? I hope we really have a good webinar, and I look forward to hearing some of the later presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Siv, and also you got a chance to do some campaigning for yourself. Stay there with us because I'm interested to know that, because the Nordic countries have many times boasted themselves and claimed that they are so much better than the rest of the world when it comes to the democratic development and participation. What is your view on that?
I think there is some focus on the Nordic countries, but there are also still a long way to go. And sometimes when we boast about being so excellent that we are really world masters of this discipline, we tend to ignore the issues that are there. There are some issues. It could be, until recently, there was with persons with guardianship was not denied the right to vote in Denmark. It has been amended for European elections, but it's still a matter of all national elections, especially for some of them. But it could also be if you're hospitalized in the days before the election, can you still vote? There's been some rebuilding at the election poll station, and suddenly you have to enter through stairs to be able to vote. So we have a lot of obstacles. I myself, when I voted last time, I was voting ahead of the election, and I was not allowed. There was no booth for me to enter with my wheelchair, so I had to vote in public. I don't mind about it, actually. For me, it's okay, but it could be for others. If they would not be able to vote in secret, they would have said, well, I can't vote, I have to go. And it's just a small thing. And actually, when I pointed it out at the election place, there was a bit like annoyed, why are you complaining about this? You have the right to vote. So sometimes it's all these small things, and maybe it's even worse because we have an understanding that it's perfect in our Nordic countries.
Do you think that the Nordic countries should do more of self-criticism?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we have to be aware and address that, and to have this idea that, we always have to strive to do better. We have to know and accept that there are always some situations, because sometimes it could be a lift at a polling station which breaks down just hours ahead of the election. So what are you going to do? But if you have the energy, and if you have the interest to say, we want to do this better, then you're maybe more prepared to say, okay, so if people come here who cannot enter through the stairs, we are going to go to them and help them vote in their cars or in front of the station. It's not perfect, but we want to include everyone. We want to, when we are a political party and are doing election meetings, we want to make sure we include everyone, to only choose a place which is accessible, to have sign language interpretation, to make sure the information format is accessible, and all these things. We can do better, but we have to really have the intention of saying, I want this, we want this, we can do things better.
Thank you very much, Siv. And once again, a reminder that you can use the chat for questions and comments to what you've heard so far. The next speaker has plenty more than one string on his bow. He's a well-known journalist, politician, and diplomat. He has been a member of the Swedish Parliament and was in charge of the 2014 Commission on Democracy. He's a political scientist and democracy researcher, and the topic today is, what does political participation and democracy mean in the Nordic countries? Please welcome Ole Westberg.
Thank you. You are right. I'm a former person with a background as journalist and diplomat, and especially in this situation, chairman of the latest democracy inquiry. I report about that, and I'm open to questions afterwards. Democracy in Sweden is strong, but political inequality is increasing. In the Democratic Commission, we found that democracy today is deeply rooted in Sweden. But on the other hand, the political influence is not evenly distributed. Those who are actively involved in civil society organizations and in political parties are mainly well-educated and socioeconomically resourceful people. There were also significant differences in voter turnout in last election between Swedish-born and foreign-born citizens. In most Swedish cities, turnout differed about 50% between the election districts that were located in areas dominated by immigrants and more traditional areas. Foreign-born elderly people, and people with disabilities are underrepresented in the elected assemblies. When it comes to the citizens' attitude, total citizens' attitude to their political influence, only 15% of Swedes believe that they have any possibility for influence between the elections. And Sweden has the longest time between elections, 4 years of all democracies, because we, uniquely enough, have local and national elections at the same day and year. This, with a common election day, also leads to that local politics fall behind the shadow of national politics and the issue of which government will get the national power. In Sweden, local politicians are surprisingly anonymous. Few voters can name them. The midterm democracy between the elections is therefore weak in Sweden. Here you could do a lot. In the Democracy Committee or Inquiry, we had Finland as a model because there is a citizens' initiative there, which means that if 1% of the voters locally or nationally sign a proposal, manually or digitally, it must be raised in the relevant political assembly. That was the way Finland, for example, got the same-sex marriage. Well, to a much greater extent, modern democracy and progressive politicians should use social media. In the last election in Sweden, the Swedish Democrats, which is a sort of right-wing populist party, had more activity on Facebook than all other political parties together. And if you compare Donald Trump, he have now 89 million followers on Twitter. Joe Biden only 80 millions. This is not uniquely analysis. It's quite clear that social media often keeps people in a sort of bubble of opinion, and that it contributes to polarization in political opinion. As the electorate becomes increasingly polarized, democracy becomes increasingly paralyzed. It's therefore a responsibility for the democratic parties to use social media in higher than they do today. Here is Taiwan, a clear role model. Taiwan is Asia's foremost democracy. Among the interesting things about Taiwanese democracy, I visited Taiwan several times, is that social media is used to anchor and strengthen democracy. Just over 90% of Taiwan's 23 million people are active on social media, and the government there publishes the bills they are considering 60 days before the decision is to be made. And all citizens have the opportunity to comment, express their views, and put forward alternative proposals. The site is designed so that those who participate, they don't replicate, it's not a part of a public debate, but they talk directly with the decision makers. The purpose is for politicians to listen and for everyone to be able to present their views. As all residents have had the chance to participate over the past 4 years through the use of social media, Taiwan has achieved more and more of unity. Well, when social media becomes an open forum and when all citizens feel that they can make their voices heard and participate in decisions between elections, the power of the authoritarian movements is stopped. The liberal Taiwanese government's way of using social media and explaining deliberative democracy should therefore be a model for democracies around the world, not at least for Sweden. People with disabilities are less involved in democracy than the rest of the population, and digital policy would make it easier for many with disabilities. People with disabilities are underrepresented in political assemblies, even though they are members to a decent degree of political parties, about the same extent of others, but they are not represented. There are numbers of shortcomings when it comes to people with disabilities having equal opportunities to participate in politics. Unavailable polling stations, inaccessible information, and premises that are not adapted are used for committee meetings and political meetings. The last election showed that there were differences in turnout. People with reduced eyesight, reduced mobility, and even complaints of anxiety, they vote to a lesser extent than citizens without those impairments or problems. For those with impaired visions, there is also the difficulty of keeping the voting secret in cases that they want to vote for a person. Nearly half, about 43% of the premises used for committee meetings and in the municipalities are not fully accessible. Hearing loops are often missing. Party meetings are often held in accessible locales and places. Those shortcomings are serious and in practice mean that a large group of citizens are prevented from actively engaging in politics, both in their role as voters and as elected representatives. So at last, in the Democracy Committee, we were able to establish that people with disabilities are hindered in their democratic citizenship. Basic conditions for participation on equal terms are lacking. It's unworthy of a democracy. The representativeness and activity of the disabled in politics is not a topical issue today. It should be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olle. And I would like to ask you, because this image that you are painting is not very bright. What do you think we need to do to increase the possibility for participation?
Well, first of all, the voting places where you vote in the election, they should be accessible. They should be changed to in a higher level, the political parties, but also the departments and of different kinds and the agencies should work digitally, because that makes the access better. And it is the parliament, for example, should be much more accessible. Today, if you are not you can't move very easily. It's very difficult in the Swedish parliament to go between the party locals and where you vote. It's much better in the European Parliament. There, one of the Swedish members of parliament, David Liga, he is not have not a personal accessibility, but he can move very simply in the modern building of the European Parliament. So there's a lot of things practically to do, and they are not so difficult. So they should really be done. It should be more prioritized by the government and the Parliament.
And why isn't it?
Well, I don't know. It's a lot of political or democratic issues that is not very in front. but it's not so difficult, so it should be. But I think one should have more of opinion making about politics, and that also could be done from as well the agency as from organizations.
You mentioned Taiwan as a good example or best practice example. What do you think that the Nordic countries could learn from Taiwan when it comes to participation for persons with disabilities?
Well, mostly that you can use digital medias to open up for people who can't go on meeting, they can sit at home, and they could in that way really participate. I think that's the main thing.
And you also talked about the polarization in the society, and it's happening everywhere right now. How does that affect, I mean, the inequality, the polarization, how does this affect the situation when it comes to participation?
Well, it does in a way, because when it's very participated in a society, there are the big groups against each other. So minority groups of different kinds are not very much looked upon. You could see that with Donald Trump. Actually, the American disability laws that are not so bad, they were introduced by Bush Senior, who was a Republican. But we know that Donald Trump hasn't ever mentioned anything about people with disability.
Very interesting. I'd like to call Arvid, because I can see that there are something going on. There are some activities going on in the chat. Arvid, give us a resume.
Yes, I think one interesting thing which I've been written here is the debate about the electronic voting possibilities. Also, that also something Olle was into. I mean, the accessibility issue when it comes to this. I mean, we have the technology, why don't we use it? And then from Finland, from Amu, he says that Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, they have guidelines about political participation of disabled people. That's important information, and you have the link in the chat. And then also in Sweden, there are going on from Studieförbundet courses for persons with intellectual disabilities in democracy and how to vote and all this stuff. That's so now the chat seems to be alive. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good, and I know that Olle is still alive and still live with us. Olle, could you just reflect a bit on this with electronic voting, because the technology is there, but why are governments hesitating using it?
Well, that's of course of the risks, but and I'm not sure that we should have electronic voting. Otherwise, that the locally you might have there in some cases, but you can look at Estonia, because in Estonia they have this digital voting, and one can look at how it works. But another thing I didn't mention, but I thought of now, is that the public service medias should, in a much higher level, let people with disabilities come in and also express that they want and be part of the what they do.
You think that the representation in Swedish media, for example, is too poor right now?
Yes, I think so. And what's done in the commercial medias is difficult to decide about, but not about public service. That could be one of the things they should do.
Thank you very much, Olle. Thank you, Arvid, and thank you all the participants so far. We will now, I think, move on, and we will dig even deeper into the level of inclusion in the political system in the Nordic countries. I have the pleasure to welcome Rune Halvorsen, who is the professor of social policy at the Oslo Metropolitan University and also a scientific coordinator of a European project focused on assessment of gaps in social protection and social exclusion in Europe. And you will answer the question, how inclusive is the political system, or are the political systems in the Nordic countries? Please go ahead, Rune.
Thank you so much, Ted, and a very good morning to all of you, and thank you for having me. So in this presentation, I'll try to contextualize the discussion about the opportunities for political participation on the part of persons with disabilities in the literature and what we know about the Nordic welfare states and how they have developed historically. And one of the two questions I would like to address is, first, the Nordic model for political participation, does it apply to persons with disabilities? And second, how does the emerging human rights regime for disabled people influence opportunities for political participation in the Nordic countries? And first, I would like to argue that the Nordic welfare states as they emerged after the Second World War have been pretty good at providing persons with disabilities with income maintenance benefits and social security and social services that will protect persons with disabilities from major life risks and to facilitate also the quality of life to a larger extent than many other European countries. And also, more recently, the Nordic countries have also emphasized more the opportunities for choice for persons with disabilities and opportunities to live independently and to live in the community. Not least, Sweden has been probably a world champion in providing personal assistance for persons with disabilities. But I would say would argue that we perhaps have more to do and is more undone in the field of ensuring the voice and influence of persons with disabilities. So if the overall aim is to provide persons with disabilities with the opportunity to be full and effective citizens, to participate in all realms and areas of society, and also not only to be able to live a decent life, but also to be able to act autonomously and be able to participate in political life, and also be able to influence on decision-making processes of importance to themselves and society as a law at large. We also have a way to go to also develop the influence dimension of social citizenship in the Nordic countries. And when I'm talking about political participation in this context, I'm not only having in mind representative democracy, such as participation in political parties and local and parliamentary elections, but also the involvement and inclusion of persons with disabilities in the different consultation mechanisms we have typically in the Nordic countries, such as user representation at the local, regional, and in national boards, for instance, in councils of disabled people and in hospital boards, but also the participation of disabled people's organizations, and also the opportunities to participate and involved in trade unions and other civil society organizations. and also the opportunities for persons with disabilities to participate in public discussions, and also to be able to be involved in discussion in the radio, in the television, in newspapers, and social media. And as some of you have hinted at in the chat already, this is also very much related to what extent these media are available and accessible to persons with disabilities. But we will return to that shortly. So what has characterized the participatory dimension of democracy in the Nordic countries? Well, the expansion of the Nordic welfare states were very much relied on the industrial relations that emerged after the war, the development of tripartite industrial relations with close collaboration and dialogue between employers, trade unions, and the government. And since the growth of the Nordic welfare states required economic growth, there was a concern also to ensure that one managed to balance the economic growth with the redistribution of the income to larger sections of the populations. And in this system, the trade unions also managed to negotiate access to higher wages and also to have an influence on the priorities of the government. In exchange of that, they didn't really challenge or confront employers or business interests too strongly. So although the rhetoric in sometimes were quite perhaps militant, in practice it has been a large emphasis on achieving consensus among the trade unions and employers and in dialogue with the government. And within this system, the trade unions have paid attention to the requirements and needs of persons with disabilities to the extent that were already in employment, that the persons with disabilities were in danger of losing their jobs, for instance. But disabled people's organizations were never really included as part of this tripartite negotiations. However, nevertheless, the disabled people's organization have managed to establish a dialogue with the government apart from those industrial relations or industrial negotiations. For instance, disabled people's organizations have participated in the annual negotiations about the income maintenance benefits since 1967. And also, for a long time, Norway has also had a National Council for Equal Opportunities of persons with disabilities, with a combination of representatives from disabled people's organizations and experts, for instance, from the universities. And but some of these mechanisms that have been in place seems also to be given less priority today than they used to in the 1970s and 80s. For instance, the annual social protection negotiations is today referred to as consultations, and also the parliament is never not involved any longer in those consultations. And also the National Council for Equal Opportunities has been closed down and is not any longer in working or in operation in Norway. And also in the past, it used to be a contact forum for disabled people's organizations and the government in Norway. And one disability policy activist in Norway, for instance, says we used to have a contact forum between the government and DPO since the early 1980s. Both parties could ask for a meeting. But as she explains, that this no longer is given priority and has been replaced with a annual roundtable discussion. But she also regretted very much that there has been a decline or deterioration in the communication with the Norwegian government over time. And also, it used to be in the past, at least from the 1990s and up to 2010, a cross-ministerial committee of undersecretaries to coordinate disability policy across the ministries in Norway, and this has been closed down. On the more positive side, perhaps there has been an act on legal obligations for counties and municipalities to appoint the Council of Disabled People since 1991, and there has also been increasing user involvement or appointment of representatives from disabled people's organizations in the health sector since 2002. But overall, we might ask if disabled people's organizations are consulted to the same extent today than it used to be 10 or 20 years ago. Also, when it comes to the more representative democracy and opportunities for participation in elections, Ole Vastberg has already touched on this in his presentation, but the few studies we have of accessibility of polling places in Norway suggest perhaps that the physical barriers in terms for persons with mobility impairments are generally often paid attention to, but there seems to be less attention to the needs for all the persons with visual impairments or disabilities. For instance, there's a repeating problem of ensuring secret elections for persons who are blind or have a visual impairment. And in experiment, a pilot project on e-voting in Norway, they found that in certain respects, this could provide opportunities to ensure better secret elections, also for persons with disabilities, as it gave an opportunity to vote from home. But at least in 2011 and 2013, there was reported problems with the inaccessible ICT solutions for persons with visual impairments. And also e-voting has not continued as a pilot project in Norway since then. Both in regard to the opportunities to participate in elections, in parliamentary elections and local elections, but also in access to information. There's repeated concerns about accessibility, and we, as all of you will know, there's a high expectations from the UN expert committee that the Nordic countries will make continuous progress in this area, both by developing solutions that are accessible and usable to as many people as possible through so-called universal design, but also to provide reasonable accommodation in individual cases when the needs arise. And here, I think partly also due to this negotiated contract between the employers and the trade unions and the social democratic governments in the Nordic countries, and the hesitation perhaps to impose too many obligations on employers and the on business. There has also a repeat concern that one should not impose too many regulations on the market actors, and a concern about disproportionate burdens for business if we introduce too many requirements to accessibility, for instance, to transport, to information and communication technology, to the mass media, and so on. And so, for historical reasons, I think the Nordic countries are still perhaps performing a lot better when it comes to the provision of income maintenance benefits and social services for persons with disabilities. But we have a job to do to overcome the fear and find ways to negotiate solutions that enable us also to ensure and facilitate better accessibility to not only to the post stations, but to the information and transport, for instance. So admittedly, the Nordic countries have also introduced new statutory regulations since the 1990s, often inspired by the developments in the European Union, with the Employment Directive, and more recently the Web Accessibility Directive, and the Directive on accessibility in the EU. And but a major problem today is now that we also lack actually information and lack statistical indicators to monitor the developments in accessibility over time and across the countries. So at this stage, we know fairly little about the actual, I have fairly little evidence to support and to ensure that we make systematic progress in this area. More generally, it's a democratic problem that we know very little about how disabling barriers shape people's opportunities for participation in political decision-making processes. And for instance, this recent report, Opportunities for All from 2019, covered the opportunities for political participation on the basis of gender, on the basis of ethnicity, but had nothing to say about persons with disabilities or about disabling barriers. And here you could argue that Norway is also neglecting its obligations under the UN Convention, also to ensure that it has necessary data to be able to monitor and follow and to monitor the developments in opportunities for participation for persons with disabilities. So there's a need for more new data to comply with our obligations and the UNCRPD Article 31 on, and we need data that are more consistent and comparable across time and countries. And we need more panel data, for instance, that makes it possible to follow the same individuals over time and opportunities to participate in political decision-making processes. And we need also more coordinated efforts across the Nordic statistical bureaus to make the data comparable across the Nordic countries. And finally, we need development on indicators of accessibility. We know fairly much about the opportunities for participation in employment and participation or people's receipt of income maintenance benefits and so on, but we know almost nothing about people's experience or lack of people experiences with accessibility or lack of accessibility. So as a matter of paradox, I've hinted at that there's in Norway, it seems to be given less priority to disability policy than in the decades before the adoption of the CRPD. And it's one of my concerns that some of the established mechanisms Norway used to have in place in the 1990s and also back in the 1980s have now been closed down and replaced with more superficial and less frequent formal contact points between the government and disabled people's organizations than it used to be. And I also argued that there's a democratic problem that we lack information about how disabling barriers influence democracy and opportunities for political participation. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rune. It sounds to me that things were much better 20 or 30 years ago. Is there anything of this that you could actually bring back and try to revive today?
So I believe that the current Norwegian government first is considering to re-establish the committee of undersecretaries to coordinate better between the ministries, and also there's ongoing activity also to reintroduce a disability action plan or strategy in Norway. But also there has been a concern that the disability strategy in Norway will be too fragmented and lack an overall vision and just a collection of action points for the different government or for the different ministries without a really comprehensive view of the obligations and the UN Convention.
I mean,
I'm sorry for not being more optimistic, but yeah.
No, but you're truthful. And I mean, is there anything that, I mean, we are now in a Nordic context. Is there anything that you could do on the Nordic level that the governments or the national level does not manage to? So
yes, first of all, I think the Nordic Council ministers and the institution at the Nordic level have can help to raise awareness with this, webinars such as this, and also there's, I think, need to coordinate better the monitoring of the opportunities for participation across the Nordic countries. And it would be helpful to have, useful to have more systematic data on accessibility in general, not only to the post stations, but more generally to transport and to information, access to mass media, and so on. That enables people to have an opinion about politics, and also to promote more dialogue between the governments and disabled people's organizations to stimulate and to continue to bring up this issue on the political agenda.
You were also calling for new data. What could new data do to improve the situation? So
also under the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, it's emphasized or stressed that research or data or statistics are important to be able to map the situation, the current situation, and where are the gaps today that we should try to cover in terms of policy areas where we could do better than we do today, and not least also to get the perspective of and views of persons with disabilities themselves more clearly represented on the table. So it's a bit depressing that all existing research in Norway has on power distribution of power, and on research on democracy in Norway has so far neglected a view of disability. I think it's partly say something about that we have a long way to go to recognize persons with disabilities as persons with political rights, and also as subjects who are entitled to be included on equal level with other persons. And it's I have started wondering if it's perhaps sometimes the medical model of disability that is preventing us from seeing disability not just as an individual health problem and imagine that people should be taken care of, but that actually disability is something else when we look at through the eyes of a more social model of disability and focus on how the organization of society creates barriers for persons with disabilities to participate and to be involved. So a strong focus on a social model, or what in the Nordic countries also has been referred to as a relational model of disability, would perhaps could also inspire also political scientists and others involved in research on democracy to change their perspective. Yeah.
Now we are going to get the views from a more personal and maybe self-experienced angle. We have a panel of politicians from different Nordic countries representing different political parties and orientations. And I'd like you to turn on your cameras and sound now. It's Torstein Lerhold from Norway, Steinun Dora Arnadottir from Iceland, Mats Andersson from Sweden, Amo Urunen from Finland, and Jan Jakobsen from Denmark. And I'd like to start with you, Amo. When you hear Rune and Ulle and the other speakers review the situation, what comes to your mind then?
Well, many things. I mean, I can agree with the problems that there are. Disabled people are not very well represented in the political life, and the higher you get in the hierarchy, the less you see disabled people there, especially people with a strong identity of a disabled person. And that leads to a situation where people are talking for us or about us without us. And I see that as a problem. But I can see, I mean, it connects to several other like structural problems in our societies, like, for example, that the employment markets exclude disabled people very much. I mean, maybe the image of a politician that we have in our mind in Nordic countries is not a picture or an image of a disabled person, which is a shame. Actually, last week I participated a roundtable webinar about the disability inclusion in political level in Kazakhstan, or I was, the webinar was held in Kazakhstan, but I was in Finland, of course. But anyway, it was really interesting that the people who were there, they were actually some ministers and stuff like that. So often we seem to also think in the Nordic countries that we are somehow more progressive and we know these things better and our societies care more. But then I'm going to Kazakhstan, which you would think that it's very undemocratic and don't give a damn about disability inclusion in politics. And then you see all the ministers in there. So I think we should really reflect our attitudes and our willingness of really doing things. Because I'm a politician like in the Greens in Finland. And I even noticed that even if we have a really, really strong history of disability inclusion, one of our first members of the parliament was actually a disabled person. But still, when you are trying to get like interpretation, sign language for a general assembly, an annual meeting, then you just end up talking about how much it costs and how there are not many people who need it, where when actually it would be a really important symbolic thing to do to show people that we really want to share the communication for everybody. So yeah, we have a lot of problems.
Steinun Dora from Iceland, do you how do you look upon this? I mean, this situation that actually newer democracies have a more involving attitude to persons with disabilities than old democracies like the ones in the Nordic countries?
Oh wow. I'm not sure how to answer this question. I think it comes to the mental thinking of, or just how you view people in societies, and maybe countries that have been fighting for their rights as people and countries are more aware of that there are groups in their countries that also need to fight for their rights. I don't know, but there might be some difference here. But I think that what is most important in all societies is the willingness of the people, and thereby also the willingness of the politicians to have an inclusive society.
Mats, in Sweden, what is your personal experience of being elected, being an elected representative with disabilities?
Can't say. It's a hard question because one of the problems to getting in the politics, you have to be one of them. And they have, as we all have some difference in disability, so it's hard to be one of the gang and one of the people, so it's hard to be listened to and heard on. But I have a positive problem with, because I am hard to read people's sign like that, so I just mumble on as now, and that is hard to get into it. The groups who is deciding something.
Torstein, in Norway, do you have the same experience that it's hard to get into the club?
For me personally, no. I think it's started early, joining a youth party. And it's my view that younger people are more open to people with disabilities. And when you are in the youth party, it's easier to join the club of senior politicians because you have a voice and you have a role. And even if I absolutely recognize the challenges Rune was addressing, I think I'm a bit more optimistic, and I think there is a lot of room for people with disabilities to join parties, especially in smaller areas, because there is a general problem of local parties that they don't have enough people to engage in politics. So I think they need everybody, if you know what I mean. So my experience is that when people are, like, I'm in Center Party, and I have been there since I was 19, and they've been used to me, like they've been accustomed to my needs, and so every meeting, every conference, every gathering, they have sought out to find a location that is universal designed. And so my experience is that, like with every tolerance questions, it's about knowledge. And when they learn to know you and see you as a human being and not your disability, it's easier to move up to the ranks.
If we try to stay in this like optimistic mode, then do you think that actually it could be an advantage to be a person with disabilities because you don't fit to the, what do you say, regular image of a typical politician?
Yes and no.
Okay.
For me personally, yes. I have used my disability actively to create a name for myself as a politician, but I think it is important to recognize that some people don't want that, and I will also say that first and foremost, the most important thing for people with disabilities to join political parties, they have to be able to, and that is a question of if you have personal assistance, right, to drive you to the meetings and to accompany you and so on. Yeah.
Jan, when with Torstein, he came into politics when he was young. I don't know about you, but how do you reflect on what Torstein just said?
Well, I started in politics at 22 years old, back in the 70s, and in many years I was, and I'm still left-wing left-wing activist, and I think it was very hard in the beginning, but after about 20 years, I was accepted with the way I want to act in politics, and it was easier. But I will say, when I started in politics, it was to do anything about disability. I was a person who wanted to change the world or change the conditions we live under, just as Sif also told about. But in some ways it has changed, and now my life is about disability almost all the time. I work with disability in a school for children with disabilities. I talk about disability. I'm in the disability organizations and so on. But I think it's very hard for some groups to participate in the democratic process. And we who just have a physical disability, it's easier. It's easier to be accepted when you can see that you have a disability. It's much worse for people, for example, with Asperger or something like that. They don't have the same possibilities as I have. I know a guy. He wanted to go for the municipal council too, and he was afraid that he could not be a part of it because he would be very tired in long meetings. And I told him we all do, and it's unacceptable that we just do it this way. We in our council we have meetings in 4 hours. We even without a break, and we can do it. No one can, and we have to change the way we use democracy and think politics. That's my point here.
Yeah, Stein and Dora, do you recognize the same problem that some groups have more difficulties than others to get involved into politics?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Also, Stein and Dora, what do you say about this?
Yes, I think this is totally right, and this is what many of those that have spoken here today have mentioned, and also others, also my fellow panelists. It's about the accessibility to society as a whole, because you don't just jump out one day as a full-grown politician. It's a kind of an evolving process, and I've been like others that have been speaking here involved in politics for many years, but I've only been a member of parliament here in Iceland for the last 6 years, and I think it is also true that people view people with different impairments or disabilities in different ways. And there was actually made a survey here in Iceland, I think about 10 years ago, and that showed that the general public also had very different views on what people with different impairments were capable in life. So I think this is something that is not only a problem in the politics, but you can see it everywhere in society. And if you can see it everywhere in society, it reflects in the politics. But I think that, yeah, access for everyone in all aspects of society is also the key to the participation of everyone everywhere in society. Easy to say, but unfortunately it has been a bit more difficult to realize.
Amu, what changes do you see need to be done to secure full participation?
Well, a lot, because can I make a comment about?
Of course you can.
To the previous, I mean, I don't remember who did it, but that that it would be some kind of a benefit to be a disabled person, or that we would be treated equal. You know, I personally have been told that I'm a mascot in my party, which means that I'm always brought up when they want to show that there is that our party is somehow interested in disability. So I mean, this is quite a rude awakening for me to realize that that I'm only that they don't really take me seriously. Of course, now I have went through that and we have settled it and everything. But anyway, but I think that we need to start from the very grassroots level of party. Nobody comes to the politics, or very few people come to the politics to, you know, be a minister straight away. No, they start from, you know, board game nights of the youth organization of the party, or something like that, something that seems very unofficial or informal. And I think that we should also notice that kind of activities to get people involved. And then I know from experience that all parties, they decide who they want to lift up in their communications. You know, nobody is alone in this job or in these circles. They always decide who they want to I mean, who has the skills and who has the charisma and whatever. I think showing more disabled people commenting about important issues, political issues, would be really one of the things that the parties could do. Also, accessibility in all ways. I mean, the whole spectrum of accessibility should be considered. Also, I think that disabled people should be in decision-making bodies of the parties. And what I think is that also disabled people, I mean us, like me and everyone, we should be, you know, demanding more inclusion, more accessibility, and we should maybe create networks, because like I have noticed that I don't know all the people who work in other parties who, with disabilities, and we could maybe do something together, but because we don't really know who we are and we don't have any connection, then that's like power we are giving to someone else. So I guess there are many different ways to make it better. And the one thing that I would really wish for our structures, because what I hate the most is that when disabled people are talked about, we are always offered, you know, some advisory board seats or counter, you know, kind of. We are still thinking, we are still seen as users of services and stuff like that. Okay, I think those kinds of panels they have a role, but in order to really make decisions, those panels are really not very important. And I really think that something should be done. And what I wish from the disability movement, I have been in the disability movement for 22 years or something like that, since I was in high school. And what I also wish is that we would give up this kind of a, you know, intention of being nice, you know, being friendly, because we actually, if we want to make the convention happen, I mean the Convention of the Rights of the People with Disabilities, we should actually require, we should really demand things. We should be quite radical, and we should work together, you know, cross disability ideas, because at least in Finland, I don't know how this is in other Nordic countries, but my impression is that it's pretty similar. That we seem to be stuck in the diagnosis approach, you know, that everybody's just doing something, puzzling something with their own diagnosis-based organization, and the cross-disability analysis, like a social analysis. I have studied social sciences, so I have thought about this a lot, that we are kind of lacking the cross-disability approach to politics, and because CRDP is very cross-disability, you know, the idea of it's not very diagnosed-based. I guess that is one of the reasons why we get so stuck in this. Like, if you read the chat here, you can read comments about how this group of disabled people is not represented, and this one isn't. So I see that also in the disability field, we could maybe do better.
Mats, what do you say about that? Do you have the same opinion that you need to work more cross-diagnosed and also be more radical?
More radical, yes. But yeah, and the problem is we have all the different diagnoses, but we have at the same time different problems. As myself, I'm full working people. I walk and I have don't have a wheelchair or anything like that, and that's a problem too, because I look right, but I have a hidden problems, and that's a story. That's a hard thing to get people to understand, because as in my world, I know a lot of things. I get things quick and everything like that. So that's a problem, because when I'm not working well, I'm not working well. So that's a problem. So to have some organization and talk over the lines, because it is very strict lines between different disableds too. Because in some groups we are more sick or more problems, but we all have the same brain, so it works almost the same way. So in many places it's been the look is the right thing to be disabled. So I hope anything taken any offense what I say, but
yes, of course. Yes, thank you very much. And Torstein, if we move over to you, what do you think about this? Do you need this like kind of cross-diagnosis kind of cooperation, more of that to secure the democratic participation, or what is needed according to you?
Actually, I don't want to answer that, because I don't know. I'm uncertain. I think it's important to say that even if the society as a whole has a responsibility to include people with disabilities, both in politics and jobs and so on, it's important to say that people with disabilities also has a responsibility themselves, an individual responsibility to seek political roles, to join a party and to actively participate. And it's easy to say, because you may have to face rejections, turn downs, and so on. But I think that I believe that people in general are tolerant once they learn to know you and who you are as a person, and when they learn to look past disability, they will recognize you. And I want to comment on the mascot, a part of Amir's what Amir said.
Yeah, please go ahead.
And I was very conscious about that possibility, that my party wanted to use me as a mascot for that we are disabled friendly and so on. So for me, it was especially in the beginning of my political career, I was very conscious about never talking about disabled rights or disabled politics. I always wanted to talk about my resistance against the European Union and NATO membership and so on, just to like remove myself from my disability. Yeah.
So Jan, do you think that this could be like a way not to be considered as a mascot or whatever, to talk about other issues than the things that you got involved with when you started as a politician or an activist?
Yes, I didn't want to talk about disability, just as said before, but I think that we have something. Nevertheless, what our political, what we stand for, we have something in common, and we have to fight for this. We have to stand together and say people with disabilities has to be a part of the political system just like everybody else. Then we can talk about anything. But we have to stand and say we want to be a part of it, and we have to take care of each other. That's one of my points.
Yeah. Steinum Dora, you're nodding now. You agree to this?
Yeah, I think this is a discussion we could have for a long time, and this has been something I have thought a lot about in my political career, because I don't want to be a mascot, but I also want to kind of do my thing in clearing the path for others. And there are more people with disabilities in the Icelandic parliament, and we sometimes stick together on disability matters, on practical matters of accessibility of the workplace, and then we fight and don't agree on the politics because we present different political parties. So this is a very important and also a very fluid situation you are in. And I think it is, well, for me personally, as a politician, I think that I have to be good on disability issues, but I am also like our spokesman when it comes to the financial budget as a whole. So I don't want to be the like the ability or the excuse for others in my party or others in parliament not to learn about disability matters because the disabled person should do that. So I kind of have like this mixed emotion to this, that I have to know everything or as much as I can about disability issues, but I am not the only one that should be representing them. So I think that this is something that is very important, and we could, us politicians, could have a long discussion about how we tackle this.
Mm-hmm. I would like to ask you one last question, though, even if this particular question could be discussed forever. What role do you play as, and also not only role but also responsibility as role models to get persons with disabilities involved in politics and to participate in the democratic life? Anyone can answer. Amu.
First of all, I like to talk about other things than disability, but nobody seems to listen to me. That's a problem. But of course, in local politics, I have to take a stand on everything, which is very refreshing. But anyway, I don't like to. I mean, of course, seeing someone disabled in the politics is a very important message for all other disabled people. And I know that some people have went to the politics because they have seen me there. Of course, I don't know how much they have done that because they somehow, admire me or something, but they have just maybe seen someone that they can identify with and that shares their passion for politics. And they have thought that, okay, that it seems to be possible. And also I have encouraged people, like very, very actively, I have encouraged people to join parties or to do whatever they want. And one of my biggest heroes was a politician, a disabled politician, Kalle Kankkola, as well. And he was, but I don't think if I think about myself as the teenager who was like really, who saw that Kalle Kankkola sitting in the parliament and everything, I don't think I was that impressed by the disability, but by the passion that he had for these issues and the idea that that disabled people should be talking for themselves and about themselves instead of giving that power to someone else. And I think that's what impressed me, and that's what I'm also trying to do to encourage people to talk about things that are important to them, whether they are disabled or not. But anyway, like I rarely think about that angle.
Does anyone else of the panel like to comment this? Mats, please.
Yes.
I always encourage people to go in politics, disabled or not disabled, but we all need people there. So that's not the difference. But this is a way for people to learn and hear about it, and hear the problems. And so we need more people in the politics, disabled or not. So always.
Yeah. Jan, did you want to say something also?
Yes, I want to say we have to accept that we are kind of role models, and that we have had some role models ourselves when we started, and we have to get more people with disabilities into politics, and we have to accept a kind of role here. And I think it's very important that we don't deny our disabilities, and we instead use it to get more people involved and to get a broader kind of democracy.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you very much. And Olle, to just summarize or to comment the discussion we just had, what do you have to say?
Well, it is about the same thing I said in advance, that one has to do more to include more people among this minority. And that's a thing that should be done as well from governments and local authorities as from the political parties. The political parties should try to involve more people with disabilities because they have special sort of contacts. So that's a lot of things to do. And I'm a bit shocked that it is not more prioritized than it is.
One question from the chat was, why don't we have a minister with a diagnosis or an impairment?
Yeah, we have, in Sweden, it was a very long time ago. We had a minister, but with that sort of problem. But he was blind. That we haven't had, and there, I think you should, if you look at it in a way, you open a sort of career possibilities in the political parties for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that might be it. Thank you very much, Ole, also for your comments, and thank you for to all participants for your chat messages. Before we finish this webinar, I'd like to welcome back Lars Lindberg from Nordic Welfare Centre, and just some finalizing comments, Lars.
Thank you, Ted. Yes, I will be brief. It has been really interesting to listen to all the discussion and the speakers. And first of all, I really want to thank you for this, both the speakers and the panelists for such engaging lectures and interesting. I also want to thank you who have listened and contributed. I can honestly say that we haven't had this many posts in the chat like in this webinar. So I can really see this a topic that engages many people. Then I want to thank you, Ted, as moderator, who led this webinar in a really good and steady way. Thanks also to the writing interpreters and Lasse from Visualized. And finally, thanks to Arvid from the Authority for Participation, who worked a lot with the webinars, with the preparation. Thank you, Arvid. In conclusion, also was mentioned, as I said earlier, there will be a comprehensive report with the summarizing from the different webinars we've had and inclusive recommendation. And it will be published in the beginning of the next year. Also, that say that this webinar will also be available later at the YouTube channel that we have at the Nordic Welfare Centre. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars. And also from me, thank you all the panelists and speakers, and most important, thank you all participants. I hope you are now inspired to continue making a change, and I hope to see you soon again. Bye now.